My name is Sofia Martinez, and I'm 41 years old. The evening my father reduced 2 decades of federal service to mall cop work in front of his entire country club was the evening I decided he'd finally learn who his youngest daughter really was. I stood by the champagne fountain at the Riverside Golf Club, watching my sister Isabella dance with her new husband while Dad entertained his poker buddies with tales of his successful daughters. The crystal chandeliers reflected off the polished marble floors, but I felt invisible in my navy cocktail dress, the same dress I'd worn to congressional hearings and federal task force meetings. 22 years with the Drug Enforcement Administration, and my father still introduced me as Sofia. She does some kind of security work for the government. Nothing too exciting, but it pays the bills. I shouldn't have come tonight. 5 days ago, I was in Phoenix, Arizona, wrapping up Operation Desert Storm, an 18-month undercover investigation that had just dismantled the Morales trafficking network. As the assistant special agent in charge for the Southwest border region, I'd spent the last year and a half living as Maria Santos, a money launderer moving cash for Mexican cartels. The operation had been my brainchild, using cryptocurrency and offshore banking to trace money flows back to the source. We'd seized $3.2 billion in assets and arrested 89 suspects across 4 states. But my supervisor, Deputy Administrator Williams, had ordered me to take leave. Martinez, you've been undercover so long, I wasn't sure you remembered your real name. Take the week. Go to your sister's wedding. Decompress. So here I was, watching Dad hold court like the successful real estate developer he'd always been, spinning stories about Isabella's promotion to chief financial officer at the hospital as if she'd just been appointed Secretary of State. My Isabella, Dad's voice boomed across the reception hall. She's everything a father could want. MBA from Northwestern, corner office, married a pediatric surgeon. Now that's what I call making it in this world. He paused, his gaze finding mine across the crowded room. My other daughter, Sofia, well, she never quite found her footing. Dropped out of law school, never married, works for some government agency doing security checks or something. She carries a gun, but it's not like she's solving real crimes or anything. The familiar burn of humiliation spread through my chest, the same feeling I'd carried since childhood when he'd praise Isabella's academic achievements while dismissing my military service as playing soldier. The same burn from every family gathering where my federal law enforcement career was reduced to paper pushing in some government office. My secure phone vibrated against my purse. A text from Williams, Martinez, turn on Channel 12 News immediately. You need to see this. I slipped away from the reception into the club's quiet library, where a large television dominated one wall. I grabbed the remote and switched to the local news station. The anchor's expression was grave as footage of handcuffed suspects being led away flashed across the screen. In what federal officials are calling the largest financial crimes bust in Arizona history, the DEA has successfully dismantled an international money laundering operation that moved over $3 billion in cartel profits through cryptocurrency networks. My stomach dropped as my undercover photo appeared on screen. Not Sofia Martinez in a navy dress, but Maria Santos with dark hair extensions and heavy makeup, the identity I'd lived in for 18 months. Leading this groundbreaking investigation was Assistant Special Agent in Charge Sofia Martinez, whose innovative use of financial technology tracking methods revolutionized how federal agencies combat cartel money laundering operations. The news switched to footage of our press conference from 3 days ago. There I was at the podium, back to my natural appearance, briefing reporters on the scope of Operation Desert Storm. I looked confident, authoritative, nothing like the woman my father had just described as a glorified security guard. Agent Martinez, who holds advanced certifications in financial crimes and cyber investigation, has been nominated for the Administrator's Award for Distinguished Service. Sources indicate she's being considered for promotion to Special Agent in charge of the entire Southwest region. I stared at the screen in disbelief. The woman on television looked like someone who commanded briefing rooms full of federal agents and testified before congressional committees. She looked nothing like Sofia, who does security work. There you are, Mija. I turned to find my cousin Luis entering the library, loosening his tie. "What are you doing hiding in here? You're missing Isabella's bouquet toss." He glanced at the television, where they were now showing aerial footage of our raids across Phoenix, Tucson, and El Paso. "Terrible stuff, all this cartel violence. Thank God you've got a safe desk job and don't have to deal with that dangerous work." I almost laughed. If he only knew that 6 months ago, I was sitting across from cartel lieutenants in underground gambling halls, convincing them I could clean their drug money through Bitcoin exchanges. "Come on," Luis said, gesturing toward the door. "Your dad's about to give another toast. You know how he gets when the whiskey starts flowing. He'll probably tell that story about Isabella's valedictorian speech again." We returned to the reception hall just as Dad was climbing onto the small stage, champagne flute in hand. The crowd quieted, all attention focused on the man in the expensive tuxedo who'd built a commercial real estate empire from nothing. "Friends, family," Dad began, his voice carrying that familiar authority I remembered from childhood board meetings in our living room. "Tonight, I want to talk about what it means to build a legacy, to create something meaningful with your life." Here we go, I thought, bracing myself. My daughter Isabella exemplifies everything I taught my girls about success. She followed the path I laid out: excellent education, professional career, marriage to a good man from a good family. She's built the kind of life that makes a father proud. Polite applause filled the room. Isabella beamed from the head table, her surgeon husband's hand on her shoulder. "Now, I love both my daughters equally," Dad continued, and my jaw clenched. "But sometimes you have to be honest about life choices. My younger daughter Sofia, she's taken a different route. Never finished law school like we planned, couldn't settle down with a nice boy, chose some government job doing security work." The words hit like physical blows. I could feel eyes on me, some pitying, others uncomfortable. Several guests had their phones out, scrolling through news feeds, completely oblivious that the woman being dismissed on stage was the same federal agent making headlines on their screens. "She carries a badge and everything," Dad continued with a chuckle, "but it's not like she's out there catching real criminals. More like a well-paid security guard, checking IDs and making sure people don't bring weapons into buildings. Steady work, I suppose, but not exactly what you dream of for your little girl." The irony was suffocating. Around me, guests were probably reading about Operation Desert Storm while listening to my father reduce my career to mall security. "The point is," Dad said, gesturing with his champagne, "success comes from making smart choices, from building something substantial, from—" "Dad." The word cut through the air like a gunshot. Every head in the room turned to me, standing at the back in my navy dress that had witnessed congressional testimony and federal briefings. Dad's face showed surprise, then irritation at the interruption. "Sofia, honey, I'm giving a toast here." "I need to correct something," I said, walking slowly toward the stage. My voice carried clearly in the sudden silence. "You said I never finished law school." Dad's smile tightened. "Well, you dropped out after that first year." "I left law school because I was recruited by the Drug Enforcement Administration," I said, continuing my measured walk toward the front. "I graduated from the Federal Law Enforcement Training Academy at the top of my class." A murmur rippled through the crowd. Dad's confident expression flickered with confusion. "You said I do security work," I continued, now halfway to the stage. "I'm an assistant special agent in charge for the DA's Southwest Border Division. I lead a team of 47 federal agents across Arizona, New Mexico, and West Texas." The murmuring grew louder. Someone near the front was staring at their phone, then at me, then back at their phone with growing recognition. "You said I'd check IDs and make sure people don't bring weapons into buildings," I said, stopping directly in front of the stage. 5 days ago, I completed an 18-month undercover operation that resulted in the seizure of $3.2 billion in cartel assets and the arrest of 89 international drug traffickers." Dead silence filled the room. Dad's face had gone ashen. "Holy shit," someone whispered audibly. "She's on the news right now." Phones erupted across the reception hall as guests frantically searched for the story. I heard gasps, saw shocked faces turning from their screens to me and back again. "Sofia Martinez," someone read aloud from their device, "Assistant Special Agent in Charge, led Operation Desert Storm, the largest financial crimes investigation in DA history. Dad's champagne flute slipped from his trembling hand, shattering against the marble stage in the sudden silence. You said success comes from making smart choices, I continued, my voice steady and clear. I chose to serve my country. I chose to spend 22 years infiltrating criminal organizations, building cases that protect American communities from poison and violence. I chose to put my life on the line instead of sitting in boardrooms negotiating property deals. I looked around the room at 200 faces staring back in stunned silence. You said I never built anything substantial. Dad, I've dismantled criminal empires. I've removed billions of dollars in drug money from the economy. I've taken killers and traffickers off the streets and saved countless lives. The silence stretched on. Dad stood frozen on the stage, mouth agape, looking like a man whose entire worldview had just collapsed. Isabella found her voice first. Sophia, we had no idea it was so important. No, I said quietly. You had no idea because none of you ever asked. In 22 years, not once did any of you ask for details about my actual work. You decided I was a failure and built your narrative around that assumption. I turned back to Dad, still standing motionless on the stage. You want to talk about building a legacy? Tomorrow, I fly to Washington to brief the Deputy Attorney General on our methods. Next month, I'll testify before the House Judiciary Committee about cartel infiltration of American financial systems. The techniques we developed in Operation Desert Storm are being implemented nationwide. Dad's face looked gray in the chandelier light. Around the room, guests were still processing the disconnect between the security guard in the navy dress and the federal agent commanding headlines on their phones. But you know what real success looks like? I asked, my voice softening. I sleep well knowing that the work I do matters. I've dedicated my career to something bigger than profit margins and property values. Every cartel we dismantle, every trafficking route we shut down, every pound of drugs we keep off the streets, that's a legacy worth building. I looked around the room one final time at all these people who'd known me since childhood, but had never seen who I'd become. Isabella, I called to my sister, still sitting stunned at the head table. Congratulations on your wedding. I hope you and David will be very happy together. I walked toward the exit, my heels clicking against the marble floor in the profound silence. As I reached the door, I heard Dad's voice, broken and small. Sophia, please wait. I paused without turning around. I'm sorry, Mija, he whispered. I never knew. I'm so proud of you. For the first time in my adult life, my father sounded like he truly meant it. I know, Dad, I said softly. Maybe someday I can tell you about the real work we do. The work that actually matters. I walked out into the Arizona night, where my secure phone was already buzzing with calls from Washington. The fight against the cartels never slept, and neither did the agents who dedicated their lives to winning it.